Last year's study attracted significant attention. It showed that Canada's onward migration rate, that's immigrants leaving Canada, had been creeping up for decades with severe spikes in 2017 and 2019. Nobody noticed because nobody bothered to check. This year's findings offer a sobering confirmation of the prior trend. The number of immigrants leaving Canada reached an all-time high in 2020. Despite extreme pandemic travel restrictions, immigrants found ways to leave the country in record numbers, and despite multiple opportunities to return, they chose not to. A majority of Canadians have now become convinced that immigration is responsible for our most costly national failings, from housing to healthcare, even traffic congestion. But those who want Canada to dramatically reduce the scope of immigration and to focus exclusively on the highest skilled immigrants will sadly find no comfort in the results that we published today. The study we're publishing this morning shows that highly coveted economic immigrants, people who are hand-selected for their skills and expertise, are actually the most likely to leave the country. And while Canada will lose 20% of all immigrants over the coming 20 years, that number spikes to 35% among Francophone immigrants. Nearly half of all Francophones who leave Canada lived in Quebec at the time of departure. Temporary workers have, of course, become a hot topic recently, but actually this data reveal that they are the most likely to stay in Canada after obtaining permanent residence. This year's Leaky Bucket also reveals striking regional differences. Most of the immigrants leaving BC, Ontario, and Quebec were living in the big cities at the time of departure, but in the Atlantic provinces, for example, most of the people who are leaving lived outside of the big cities. Those who left the Atlantic provinces also left faster, with a greater exodus in the early years after landing. We further learned that immigrants from some countries are actually far more likely to leave than others, and leavers from these countries are also far more likely to have obtained Canadian citizenship prior to departing. So what does all of this mean for Canada? That's the important question. I'd say that the most sobering implication is that the two categories of immigrants Canada prioritizes most, those are economic immigrants and Francophones, are actually the least likely to make Canada their forever home. Now, Canada has a strong national interest in retaining immigrants who bring invaluable economic and language skills to our shores, but simply opening the door is not enough. We must take a broader view of settlement services, going beyond mere support for people in need to a perspective that actually sells immigrants on Canada as a permanent home in those crucial early years. We also need to discover, this year's report confirmed last year's findings that immigrant retention is very time sensitive. The risk of departure is highest between the 3rd and 7th year after landing, and we have a national obligation and a national interest in making those years truly excellent.